Greetings, citizens. Hey you, hey friend, welcome back. And if you're new here, hi, my name's Brittany. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's Morbid makeup video. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out new videos every week, both true crime and beauty related, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you. Do it. Do it. So today's video is going to be on a case that I've had on my list to do for a while, and today is the day, and let me tell you, it is a doozy. Today we're going to be discussing the kidnapping and subsequent murder of 15-year-old Nick Markowitz in the year 2000. This is a truly sad and completely pointless and avoidable murder, and the events of this kidnapping and murder actually inspired a movie. The movie is called Alpha Dog, which if you haven't seen it, I would recommend seeing it if this case interests you, because from all the research I've done, the movie is a pretty spot-on representation of what happened in this case. So with all of that said, let me go ahead and get into telling you the story of the last days of 15-year-old Nicholas Markowitz. So, Nick Markowitz was born September 19th of 1984, making him a Virgo. He was born to his two parents, Jeff and Susan, and he had one older brother named Benjamin Markowitz, Ben Markowitz. So now we're going to jump into our handy-dandy time machine and we're going to travel back to August 5th of the year 2000, the day before the Markowitz family would change forever. You see, that night, Nick and his parents, they were fighting. Nick had come home that evening with a bulge in his pocket, and when confronted about the contents, it turned out that it was weed, Mary Jane, marijuana. Now, that might seem like a weird thing for parents to get mad at a 15-year-old in this day and age. Maybe it doesn't. It depends on your family. But in the year 2000, weed wasn't exactly what it is today. Additionally, the family had already had a tough time and a long history of problematic run-ins with drugs with their older son, Benjamin, Nick's older brother Ben. Bit of a drug issue there. Now, I couldn't find a ton of information about Ben, about his upbringing, and where exactly things went south for him. I know that Jeff was his father, but his mother was another woman from a previous relationship. Susan wasn't his mother, but Susan was Nick's mother. That much I know, so I'm not exactly sure when things went south for him or what his story is on why he ended up where he ended up, but he did have an issue time and time again with drugs, and he did hang out with a not so tight crowd. Not the kind of people you want your son to be hanging out with. Not the type of friends you want your son to have. So, with all of that said, Nick's parents had a zero tolerance for drugs, and they wanted to nip that shib right in the bud as soon as they could, as soon as they discovered that this may be an issue with Nick, which is why they were so mad that day. So, the argument got heated and Nick left. Nick left the house for a couple of hours that night, into the night, and when he finally got home, it was late, so the family decided as a whole that the next morning they would discuss what had been found in his pocket and they'd get to the bottom of it and have that conversation. Unfortunately, though, that conversation would never be had. That fight was the last conversation they would ever have with their son, because the next morning when his mother went to wake him up, get him out of bed at 11 a.m., he was already gone. So that fateful day of August 6th of the year 2000, Nick was honestly just an unfortunate casualty of being in the worst possible place at the worst possible time, because so many stars had to collide in such a specific way for this young boy to be put into such an unlucky situation. You see, Nick's brother Ben had been into some trouble. He had a friend named Jesse James Hollywood, a childhood friend, and the two had been feuding. And what had they been feuding over? Well, the age-old situation, money. Money fronted, money borrowed, money owed. The two men had been leaving each other threatening voice messages. Ben had gone as far as to break a window in Hollywood's home. And this is enough to piss anyone off, honestly, but it didn't help that Jesse James Hollywood was a drug dealer, and he had a lot of people who knew him, associated with him, worked for him, and did things for him. So this made him more dangerous than the average angry friend for you to be feuding with. Something I personally think is that it wasn't just a money issue when it came to Ben and Jesse James Hollywood, because the two had been friends and colleagues in a sense. So I think that this also had a lot to do with respect that Hollywood felt that he was owed and wasn't getting from Ben. But that's just kind of a feeling that I get knowing the drug world, my limited experience and information on the drug world. It seems like respect is a pretty big thing, and that Ben wasn't giving Jesse the respect that he probably felt he deserved and was owed. Especially seeing as that the two had known each other a long time and had been friends. So anyways, the afternoon of August 6th, the year 2000, 20-year-old Jesse James Hollywood had rounded up a couple of his friends. 20-year-old Jesse Rouge is how I believe you pronounce it, please let me know if I'm wrong, and 20-year-old William Skidmore. And the three of them loaded themselves into a big white van and they headed to Ben Markowitz's house in West Hills, California to retaliate for all that was going on between the two of them. Supposedly, the plan was never to be physically violent, okay? They were going to, smash up the windows of Ben's car, maybe the windows of Ben's dad's house where he was now staying, but as fate would have it, while on their way to Ben's home to retaliate, they look out the window, and who do they see walking on the road? Nicholas Markowitz. He was just, blowing off steam, getting away from his parents, trying to avoid that fight, and when they looked out the window, they recognized him because they knew Ben. They knew each other growing up, so they recognized his brother. It was all just about timing and chance in this case, and the group made a split decision to stop the van and to take advantage of the opportunity that had been presented to them that afternoon. So it was about 1 p.m. on that day, August 6th, when a witness saw the boys scuffling. Well, men, not boys. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm 31 years old, but when I think of 20-year-olds, I think of boys, but these were three grown men. These were three adults capable of making decisions, required to be responsible for their actions, and they were beating the crap out of a 15-year-old boy before grabbing Nick, throwing him in the white van, and taking off. The witness, a woman who lived in the area, did actually take down the license plate number when she saw this attack in the first place, but the police, for whatever reason, didn't actually look into the van and trace the number for a whole month. So, that day, this group of men had already had a plan to be going to Santa Barbara for a party. They weren't planning on kidnapping a boy, but they had done it now. So on their way out of the valley, they stopped and picked up another boy, a 20-year-old man named Brian, and then they sped off towards Santa Barbara where they were already planning to go. So while inside the van with these boys and Nick, these men and Nick, Brian said that it was clear that Nick was being held against his will. They had bound him with duct tape and taped up his mouth, and they told him that Nick was being held for collateral damage as a hostage until Ben paid Hollywood what was owed. And Nick was visibly panicked, as he should have been, as anyone would have been. The men then had Nick empty his pockets, and they confiscated his wallet, a little bit of marijuana he had on him, and his pager that had been going off all morning with pages from his rightfully worried mother trying to get a hold of him. So once the group reached Santa Barbara, Jesse James Hollywood and William Skidmore decided that they were going to go back to Los Angeles. Jesse James Hollywood, who was the ringleader, ordered Jesse Rouge to watch Nick and said that he was going to go back to LA and try to talk to Ben and figure out what they were going to do about the situation that they had now found themselves in. Now, what's so weird about the kidnapping and murder of Nick Markowitz is that these men who took him had no idea what they were doing. They didn't plan to take him. It wasn't something that they had sat down and planned out and thought of how to do properly. So once they had him, they had no idea what to do with him and treated it in such a casual way. Once they had gotten to where they were, they untied him and kept him untied and sometimes completely unaccompanied. They took him from house to house with a lot of people seeing him and knowing that he was taken. Some people knew he was taken. Some people just thought he was one of Jesse Rouge's friends, including Jesse's own father. They were so unprepared that Jesse even took Nick to his own house where he was seen by his father, and his dad just thought, oh, this is one of Jesse's little friends, and didn't even question the fact that the boy was only 15 years old hanging out with a 20-year-old. That didn't seem strange to him. Jesse Rouge spent the time drinking with Nick, smoking weed with Nick. He even went as far as to take Nick to a party. While at this party, not only did several people see Nick, but several people there knew that he was kidnapped. A girl later would end up testifying in court that she knew he was kidnapped. She had helped clean up his wounds, and she had asked him, like, why don't you just run away? They're not even watching you. Why don't you just leave? But Nick said that he didn't need to. He said he had taken self-defense, so if he really wanted to, he could fight off these boys and he could leave, but there was no reason to do so. They were just hanging out. They were just having fun, and this would be a cool story that he could one day tell his grandchildren. Nick was never worried because it never seemed like a serious problem to Nick or to any of the people that came upon Nick and these men over the 2-day period that they had him captive. Several people at the party even heard Rouge reassuring Nick, telling him not to worry, that everything was going to be fine, that he was going to be going home, that if he had to, he would take Nick and put Nick on a bus himself to make sure that he was safe. It was casual. Nick was having fun. Nick was meeting people. Nick wasn't bound or gagged or held forcibly. Nick was allowed to drink and have fun and socialize, and he even was able to go swimming at this party. He went swimming with one of Jesse Rouge's friends, a 17-year-old boy by the name of Graham Presley, who would later help dig Nick's grave. So while all of this is going on in Santa Barbara, Jesse James Hollywood is back in the valley trying to figure out what's going on, and he is freaking out. Jesse had called a family friend, a family attorney, and he had just essentially been like, so, I have these friends, and they took this kid for collateral damage because some money was owed. What kind of trouble could they be in? Asking for a friend, you know, that kind of vibe. This is when he realized how serious what he had done was and how much trouble he could really get in for taking Nicholas. This is when he found out that he could get life in prison for kidnapping. This is when he decided that Nick was too much of a liability, that if they let Nick go, they couldn't guarantee that Nick would be quiet even if he promised that he would, and that he'd rather take his chances with police not finding a body. During this time, Jesse James Hollywood also spoke with his dad and let his dad know what was going on. His dad didn't call the cops, by the way, but he later said that his son seemed scared and that his son seemed confused, but that he refused to tell him where the boy was so he could intervene. So after the party, Nick was taken from the house where the party was to a hotel with Jesse Rouge. While he was there, he was under the impression that somebody was going to come pick him up and take him home. But instead, it is where at this hotel that things took a very serious and very tragic turn. With a knock on the door, a 21-year-old man by the name of Ryan Hoyt entered the room with a gun. You see, Ryan owed Jesse James Hollywood money. I believe it was around $1,000, and he was going to repay this debt of $1,000 to Hollywood by murdering 15-year-old Nick Markowitz. In the early morning hours of August 9th of the year 2000, Nicholas Markowitz was marched up a remote mountain that overlooked all of Santa Barbara by both Jesse Rouge and Ryan Hoyt. Graham Presley, the 17-year-old boy who had gone swimming with Nick and then had later helped dig Nick's grave, waited in the car. Bound and gagged, Nick was hit in the back of the head with a shovel. This blow knocked him into a previously dug shallow grave. And while he laid in this hole, probably in pain, probably terrified at what was happening to him, Ryan Hoyt shot him 9 times. A 15-year-old boy. 9 times. In the dark, alone, for no reason. The men then tried to cover the body with sticks and dirt, but the grave was too shallow and it was too close to a popular hiking trail, so a couple of hikers found 15-year-old Nick's decomposing body 3 days later on August 12th of the year 2000. So after Nick's body was found and the news of his death started to spread, one of the girls who had been at the party and witnessed Nick there with these men called the police and let them know that she had information on who most likely killed Nick. After her phone call, things started to move very quickly. Jesse James Hollywood, you know, the guy who orchestrated this and ordered Nick's death, well, he ran. And a massive manhunt ensued that lasted nearly 5 years. But we're going to circle back to that in just a minute. As for the other men, William Skidmore, who was present at the kidnapping and then ended up leaving with Jesse James Hollywood in the beginning, remember him? Well, he was charged and convicted of kidnapping and robbery, and he was given 9 years for his part in the crime. He was released in April of 2009. Graham Presley, the 17-year-old that helped dig Nick's grave, apparently he had to be tried twice because the first trial ended with a hung jury. After the second trial, he was found guilty of second-degree murder, but since he was only 17 years old at the time of the crime, he was kept in a youth prison until the year of 2007 when he was released at the age of 24. Jesse Rouge, the one who kept him all of that time and was hanging out with him and spending all the time with Nick, well, he was charged with murder and kidnapping. He ended up being acquitted of the murder charges, but he did get found guilty of the kidnapping charges. And he was given life in prison with the possibility of parole after 11 years. In October of the year 2013, he was granted parole and he has since been released from prison. Ryan Hoyt, the man who actually pulled the trigger and killed Nick, was charged and convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in December of 2001. He is still to this day, 19 years later, waiting to be executed. And it seems like it's actually going to be a while longer before he is actually killed, because I was looking online, obviously, doing research on this case, and I found that Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, well, he has put in place a moratorium right now, putting a hold essentially on all deaths for prisoners on death row. So this moratorium was put into place in 2019, so this is a fairly recent thing, so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out, but right now he's still in prison on death row. Now, Jesse James Hollywood, he ran, like I said. He ran through a few different states. He had friends helping him coordinate his run from the police into a few different states before finally fleeing to Brazil, where he lived for nearly 5 years under a fake name. He was on the America's Most Wanted list, but he was eventually caught in 2005 by the police in Brazil. While in prison, in such poor taste, Jesse James Hollywood started to sign his letters Alpha Dog after his character in the movie, to which the district attorney referred to Hollywood as a ruthless coward, which I completely agree with, because what a dick, right? Isn't that gross? In July of 2009, Hollywood was found guilty and given life in prison. He has tried to appeal and tried to get a new trial, but has since been denied. In 2014, he was actually married to a woman who started writing to him while he was in prison. And real quick, why do people do that? I saw that women are writing to Chris Watts in prison. Why do you do this? I don't understand it. Like, it's not like you knew this person beforehand and had this relationship with them so you could look past the nasty that they have done. But this is a person who you go into it knowing what a monster they are and choose to seek out this disgusting baby-killing bastard. Explain me this. Explain it to me. Explain it to me. And then you choose to write them and marry them? It's so weird to me, knowing what this guy did and knowing what Chris Watts did. It's so gross. Just stop. Stop. And anyways, that, my friends, is the story of Nicholas Markowitz. And I find it to be such a sad and uniquely strange and just like messed up case that there was just so many points where things could have gone differently and they didn't. And it's just really sad and really just, it's a cautionary tale, really. There were so many times where Nick could have ran. There were so many people who saw them that could have helped him. Just like one phone call, like this seems a little weird. I'm just gonna make a quick call. If nothing comes of it, nothing comes of it. But that call could have saved his life. It's just sad and dumb. And so many people failed this kid and now he's gone and he's gone forever and there's no taking that back. Don't even get me started on all the people who, like the attorney, Jesse James Hollywood's dad, all the people who knew and could have done something and didn't and aren't serving time that should be serving time, because a lot of people were given immunity in exchange for testimony against Hollywood or the other boys, and that includes his father. And his dad, okay, his dad was also sending him money in Brazil to help him live out there. But again, don't get me started on that. And I just feel so bad for Nick's family. His mom, as I'm sure you can imagine, had a really hard time with this. She was in and out of mental hospitals and she tried to take her own life several times. And his brother, I can't even imagine okay, people have nothing but bad things to say about him, and fair. But I can't imagine how that feels to know that this happened, that your brother is dead, and that it is not that he's responsible, because I don't want to say that because that's not fair, but that it is related to you. And I feel like there's got to be so much guilt. Whether he deserves that guilt or not is your decision to make, or his decision to make, really, but he has to feel it. And that has to hurt, and that has to suck, like, bad. But anyways, guys, that completes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested in this case, I highly suggest watching the movie Alpha Dog, because it is a very good representation of this case, and it's just tragically sad to humanize these people, because I know a lot of times people hear stories and they can disconnect, but when you watch it, it's so sad, because I watched it in preparation for this video with my Gammy, and she had never seen it before, and at the end she was just like, I can't believe they killed him. I can't believe they killed him, because it just doesn't feel like it's going to happen throughout the whole movie. And that's kind of the theme of this case, is no one thought this is how it would turn out, and then it did. So I would highly recommend watching it. And please let me know down below of any cases you'd like to see me cover. I have an ongoing list in my phone, but anytime you leave me a suggestion, I add it to the list because you're filled with good ideas and you have really good taste, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And please, if you haven't already, don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell, because I put out new videos every week and I would love to hang out with you, specifically you, and thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the entire world. You're tight, this is tight, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.